Hey guys, I hope you've all been having a great week, because I haven't. Who knew you could be beaten to within an inch of your life just for never having played a certain game franchise before? Like, can you believe that? Oh, you know what? Maybe I did deserve it after all, but I think it's about time we changed that. Now, just to preface, we'll only be going through the first few games of this series in this video. I did originally want to include all the mainline games in a single video, but there's just too fucking many of them. Not only that, but I noticed that the games are essentially grouped into sagas, so that's what I'll be using to group these games into videos as well. That said, as I've done with every other video in this series, I noted down and recorded every single death I experienced when playing through each of these games. And this will also include things like failing races or certain objectives that don't necessarily result in a direct death. By the end of the video, we'll have hopefully answered a question that even Einstein struggled with. Which Ratchet Clank game is the hardest to 100%? In a galaxy far, far away. Oh, never mind. On a planet nearby, a factory seems to be developing an army of absolute chads, only to then shit itself and poop out an absolute legend. Unfortunately for him, an 8-foot height requirement is mandatory at this factory. And, well, he's fucking tiny. In hopes of escaping, he hijacks a ship only to be completely outplayed in aerial combat. His lack of combat experience ultimately leads to a crash landing on a planet called Veldin, and it just so happens that we've been patiently waiting for something like this to happen. Now, as is the case with any game, this first planet acts as a tutorial stage, allowing us to learn the countless moves at Ratchet's disposal. Our weapon of choice is the Omni Wrench 8000, and apart from swinging it normally to obliterate our foes, we can also throw it, which as a skill is something I never once used following this clip. This beastly wrench has no problem dealing with these, horny toads. Wait, what? We're also equipped with the Bomb Glove, which conveniently enough completely outranges the Electroids and their pathetic excuse for an attack. If that wasn't sad enough, these literal bots don't even take into consideration friendly fire. After thoroughly decimating our opposition and amassing a small fortune of bolts, we eventually stumble across our soon-to-be slave. Now, despite his critical condition, Clank couldn't help but wake up after smelling what could only be described as literal horseshit. Foul odors aside, Clank warns us of the impending doom our solar system faces at the hands of Chairman Drek, or as my dumbass like to call him. Bro, who does this guy remind me of? He looks like, wait, Pot of Greed, no? His head looks like Pot of Greed. I'd been playing for barely 10 minutes at this point, yet I could tell just based on the dialogue alone that I was going to thoroughly enjoy this game.
Hello, citizens of...
Wait, what? He doesn't know how to pronounce that? What the fuck? With the fate of the whole solar system on our shoulders, we strike a deal with Clank which sees our years of hard work finally bear fruit as we can finally start our beloved ship and experience a whole new world.
2 seconds later.
Wait, the game just ends like that? As eventful as Veldin was, Novalis acts as the first real stage of the game, featuring multiple objectives and routes for us to explore. Now, you'd expect an introductory level like this to be fairly easy, and for the most part, it was. The enemies don't pose much of a threat as we still outrange them, and the platforming is rudimentary at best, with no real risk of dying should you fail the jumps. Ratchet is also able to swim, which was a miraculous discovery considering how his fellow PlayStation mascots usually react to water. That being said, there was one colossal roadblock that stood in my way, and while it wasn't immediately obvious, when it hit, it hit. Okay, Insomniac, wait, what? Wait, this is fucking banging. Holy shit, how am I supposed to fucking finish the level? I don't want to. Glazing aside, there's quite a few things introduced on Novalis. There's the Gadgetron vendors, which we'll be using to buy most of our weapons, as well as the obscure golden bolts. These bolts in particular are one of the main collectibles we'll need to look out for when going for 100%. Alongside this, we'll need to complete 30 skill points and upgrade 10 weapons to their gold variants. While the large majority of these gold bolts and skill points can be collected during our initial visit, others often require a specific weapon or gadget in order to collect them, meaning we'll have to return to a lot of planets at a later point. Regardless, after dealing with a few more bird bots, we torture Agnok Buckwash, is that really his name, into letting us use his courier ship. Our next destination, planet Aridia. Now, if I'm being honest, coming to this planet first was a rookie error, mainly due to the fact that we need a particular gadget in order to complete one of its main objectives. Alright, what in the fuck is a swing shot? Even so, I got to scope out the area and it dawned on me just how powerful certain weapons are against particular enemies. See, we'd purchased the Pyrosighter back on Novalis, but considering how effective the bomb glove was, I hadn't thought to use it yet. The moment I came across these sand sharks though, I just knew I had to whip this flaming hot weapon out of my ass to deal with them. See, while these small critters die in one hit to our Omni Wrench, the sheer number of them often overwhelm you, making melee combat extremely dangerous. Having helped skid McMarks, which I've only just realised is quite a humorous name, we make our way back to the thriving city of Metropolis. Upon arriving, we buy the blaster and make our way towards Owl's Robo Shack. Along the way, we're hassled by some rude dog owners who we unfortunately had to put down. Eventually we meet with Owl, and despite his ludicrous prices, he equips Clank with one of the most practical upgrades in the game, the Helipack. With it, we're able to perform a high jump as well as a long jump. We're also able to do this. Can I get to this or like what? Oh fuck. Now, as brain dead as that play was, it still counts as our first official death, and trust me when I say that it most definitely won't be our last.
Well, duh.
Unfortunately, we'll have to put our long jump dreams behind us as we've got more pressing matters to attend to. The obstacle course here teaches us a few more fundamental movement abilities like wall jumping, but all things considered, it's a fairly tame section as again, there's no real risk of dying should you fail a jump. What I will say is that the golden bolts hidden in these levels are anything but simple. I mean, just look at what you have to do to get this one. How in the fuck is anyone supposed to find that without help? What? Upon completing the obstacle course, we meet with Helga, who, well, I'll just let Ratchet say it.
When I was competing, I would devour courses like that for breakfast.
Bet that's not all.
Before leaving Metropolis, I engaged in some thrill seeking by launching myself off the nearest bridge, and while this might come across as a final cry for help, in reality it was a strategic gliding section down towards another golden bolt. With a swing shot in hand and a good few minutes of gliding experience under our belt, I returned to Iridia, where we dominated the obstacle course. With my ego at an all-time high, it was only right that I'd find myself sinking into a lake of human feces moments later. To my surprise though, it seemed as though Ratchet had taken a liking to this feeling, as he continued to dive face first into literal shit. Now, in reality, I needed to get onto this small island as the final gold bolt was resting in the back of a particular truck. Not wanting to embarrass myself further, I looked to reach it from another platform, and thankfully enough, there seemed to be one towards the end of the stage. One simple long jump was all it took, and we had ourselves another golden bolt. Our next objective saw us travelling to Eudora, where I was once again stun-locked by some ridiculously funky tunes. The planet itself isn't too much of a step up in terms of difficulty though. The enemies still die relatively fast and our weapons are only getting better. We pick up the Glove of Doom here, and I've got to say, it quickly became one of my favourites. Like, what do you mean? You can literally throw these bad boys around the corner and then watch as your little bombs crawl their way up their assholes. Safe to say, I was feeling quite confident at this point, which ultimately led to me saying something I'd soon come to regret. I wonder why they give you 4 hit points. I feel like it's too many, no? Now, despite these enemies having the lethality of a fur-coated tadpole, there's no knowing when I'll look to humble myself. Oh, I can't believe I just fucking did that. After having attended a few therapy sessions to get over the lack of checkpoints present, we eventually stumble across Pot of Greed's henchman, and upon seeing Clank's marvelous karate skills, he promptly shits himself before running off. Despite the foul odor oozing from this infobot, the jobs advertised were somehow even worse.
Mutant animal husbandry.
That said, money's money, and before I knew it, we were making our way towards Nebula G34. To my surprise, this space station is where the game starts to up the ante in terms of its difficulty. Sure, you've got these toad-looking motherfuckers that are easy enough to deal with, but the true horrors lie in these snapper freaks who get their very own introductory cutscene. What makes these guys so terrifying, apart from looking like your typical Australian wildlife, is the fact that they attack straight after being hit. This isn't exactly lethal on its own, but when you've got numerous toads swarming you at the same time, it can get pretty AIDS. Okay, maybe 4 health isn't enough. Upon taking my first combat L, I immediately shelled up and played like an absolute pussy, spamming Glove of Doom shots until this cancerous room was fully cleared out. To my horror, however, we soon came face to face with the leader of these snappers. But as intimidating as she looks, she was a complete joke to fight. Her attacks are extremely slow and easy to avoid, and while she does birth multiple babies throughout the fight, somehow, using our god tier kiting skills, we were able to take her down with ease. Following her defeat, we pay a premium for some grind boots, spend an embarrassing amount of time hacking this door, and float out into space in our first Clank segment. Now, if you're like me, you'd most likely come into this switch up with your eyes beaming with anticipation, only to then be extremely disappointed with how boring these segments actually are. Clank can punch, he can glide with his propeller, and yeah, that's about it. We do eventually get access to some yes men, but again, we're essentially just ordering them around while we slowly waste away from inactivity. Thankfully, these feelings of apathy were short-lived as we found ourselves dashing our way out of the Blage warship. Don't ask me how we got into this situation. I wouldn't be able to tell you. Having barely escaped the exploding warship, we learn of an orgy happening down on Rilgar. Unfortunately though, it seems the participants can only shoot blanks, meaning they had to be put out of their misery. Reveling in the fact that we're not shooting blanks ourselves, we were immediately humbled by the price of the Rhino. With this realization in mind, we cleared our way through the city in the hopes of finding our big breakthrough. Eventually, we stumble across an opportunity, which sees us participating in our first hoverboard race. This was the breakthrough we needed. If we could just place first, then all of our problems would... To win these races, you've essentially got to hit every speed boost, which isn't exactly the hardest thing to do. Yeah, I know. This coming from the guy who ran face first into multiple explosive crates. By some miracle though, we were able to tap into the skills of past hoverboard legends, and using them, we completely dominated our second race. This was no time for self-glazing though, as moments later, I found myself in quite possibly the worst scenario one could ever find themselves in. Fuck me! And it wasn't obvious at the time, but this small backstep at the beginning well and truly fucked any chance I'd make it through this section alive. The water rises at such a rate that it's incredibly important that we make no platforming mistakes while running through this area. Even with a few long jumps, we still barely managed to avoid needing CPR from this hunk. Either way, we finally meet with Captain Quark, who might have the shittiest trailer out of any celebrity. Quark tells us to meet him at his headquarters, which is an interesting name for what is essentially a death course. Luckily for us, Insomniac had absolutely no faith in its players' ability to aim, equipping most guns with their very own auto-aim feature. This paired with our god-given talent of standing completely still, meant that we were able to clear our way through this so-called gauntlet without much trouble. Having made our way to Quark, we once again confirm our lukewarm IQ as we fall for the baitest trap to ever exist.
You're a donut! You're so stupid!
Being the coward that he is though, Quark scurries away leaving us to deal with this monstrosity instead. Appearances aside, this boss is pretty useless. For whatever reason, he can't seem to wrap his head around putting one foot in front of the other, and instead stays stationary like a complete idiot. This makes his attacks extremely easy to dodge, and while he's got a lethal fireball attack, the only time he'll ever use it is if you're looking to spank his cheeks from melee range. With another boss behind us, we're promptly blackmailed into doing some charity work on planet Battalia. That said, the dangers present here certainly warrant a fat paycheck. I mean, just look at what we've got to deal with. We've got circus rejects doing goddamn flips, stealth bombers that dive face first into plants the moment you get close to them, as well as whole ass tanks that have about as much range as any dude throwing a ball with their non-dominant hand. This place also has its very own ride. It's just a shame that someone loaded it up with explosive mines. This was also the first skill point that I'd earned, which we got for completing this whole grind segment without taking any damage. We'll get into these skill points a bit later. For now, we just purchased the infobot of this failure and made our way towards Gaspar. This planet by far has some of the most annoying enemies yet. Not only do we have these somersaulting tryhards from before, but we've now got to deal with these floating testicles. Known scientifically as seekers, these motherfuckers had me seeking a hospital as I found myself diving out of buildings as they exploded within an inch of my butt cheeks. My sketchy interactions with these bastards had left me with 2 nanotech hits, which wasn't ideal as I found myself getting absolutely ravaged by the whole circus troupe. Ironically enough though, I was the true clown in this situation, as I'd forgotten how non-existent certain checkpoints were. Our return visit saw us mimicking Neo as we dodged every bullet to make it into this turret. Using it, we were able to retard these washed up gymnasts, and before long we'd collected the pilot's helmet. Before making our way to what I consider to be one of the shittiest planets ever.
No! God!
We glided down into this gaping hole in the hopes of finding another golden bolt. What awaited us, however, was a masochist's wet dream. I'm talking flipping bros, countless munchers trying to get a piece of that ass, and of course, the lovely seekers. I'd taken, like 23 steps into this cave system, and I was already down to my last life. As you can imagine, this meant we had to plan our next steps accordingly, especially when you realize that the enemies in our path are doing backflips in and out of cover. Thankfully, I'm an absolute rat in these situations, and after abusing the ever-living hell out of the Glove of Doom, I was able to collect another golden bolt. Not wanting to lose our momentum, I decided we should grab the second golden bolt while we were at it, and this one in comparison is a complete joke.
So that was a fucking lie.
In all seriousness though, this pathway is more of a platforming challenge, and there's no real threat when it comes to the enemies. Having stalled for as long as possible, we're forced to Orxon, which is quite possibly the worst planet in the entire game. It's so bad in fact that Ratchet refuses to get out of the ship, meaning we'll have to play as Clank for the first few segments. These segments aren't hard in the slightest. In fact, the only challenging part is trying to stay awake as you slowly waddle your way through the endless hallways with your robotic yes men. Losing even a single bot means traveling back to collect them, giving you ample time to consider how the fuck you let that happen. Towards the end, Clank stumbles across a rather sus infobot, and despite his request, focused is the last thing we'll be. By the time I'd made it to Pokitaru, even the game had given up on me. Scenic sewers? Well, that can't be right. The good news is that the enemies here are extremely easy to deal with. I mean, you'd have to be utter dogshit to die to these fish. As a wise man once said, every mistake is a lesson, and that couldn't be more true. In the few moments following this death, I'd concocted an idea so astonishing that I might just be a genius. Now, you're probably wondering what that idea entailed. Well, what if I told you we could suck these fish up, and then blow them back out as our own rockets? I mean, well, that's gotta be up there with discovering the laws of gravity or something, surely. Speaking of scientific breakthroughs, after sucking our way through the streets of Pokitaru, we stumble across Owl's brother, who offers to install a thruster pack onto Clank, and using it we gain access to our very own fighter jet. Now, despite never having undergone any pilot training, we're able to blitz our way through these floating ball sacks, earning us the O2 mask. Unfortunately, this meant we'd be back to contracting AIDS on Orxon, this time though, as Ratchet. Now, as concerning as that statement sounds, contracting AIDS was the least of our problems. With an AQI of over 500, it didn't take long for the local wildlife here to get infected, morphing them into some of the most cancerous creatures about. Let's just put it this way, I think I'd rather confess my love to a complete stranger in public than fight my way through this clusterfuck of toxic crabs again. That said, I did manage to reach the Juggernaut machine at the end of the path without dying. As any zombie vet would know, this perk helps beef us up, allowing us to tank another hit going forward, only for the next planet to say fuck your extra health. Wait, we die in one hit? Hoven was like my kryptonite, and it had nothing to do with the enemies present. If you've seen any other video of mine, you'll know how much I hate ice-based physics in games, especially when it takes Ratchet 87 business days to stop sliding. Things somehow got even worse though, as I came across what could only be described as the gateway to hell. Nah, you gotta be taking the fucking piss with this. What is that? As you can probably guess, the few attempts to follow were anything but enjoyable. The worst part is the fact that you go from slippery as fuck to the normal on this tiny ass platform, then back to slippery. It just completely fucks your momentum. With a few extra deaths to our name, we finally make it to the other side, where I had but one question. Wait, how in the fuck did this unit slide across that thin ass pathway? No fucking shot. He hands us some crack, which we immediately take back to this recovering addict in the Jowai resort. He hands us the Persuader, which is
an illegal black market device.
As future heroes of the galaxy though, there's no way we take advantage of such a shady device.
2 seconds later.
Yeah, we'll take that. Yeah, probably that as well. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, we witness the absolute assassination of one's aura.
I'm too washed up for ground combat? True.
God damn, he doubled down. Being the rats that we are, there was no way we were going to miss this opportunity to put Quark out of his misery, and after some rather questionable missile flying, We finally came face to face with Quark once again. Realizing he'd stand no chance against us in hand-to-hand combat, he summons a whole-ass Millennium Falcon out of his ass and does his best to run away. Unfortunately for him, the plot requires that he gets his ass beat, and after sending a good few missiles directly up it, we're rewarded with yet another hellhole to traverse through. The level design of Atlantis confirmed a suspicion I'd been having for a while. There were definitely some sadistic fucks at Insomniac Games. Who in their right mind thought it'd be a good idea to combine the slippery movement of Hoven with gale force winds and enemies that could blitz your ass from the next galaxy over with their range? Even the normal platforms have a fuck ton of enemies on them, most of which aren't even sentient. Oh, well isn't that just fucking great? The pain didn't stop there either, as the final gold bolt had us swing-shotting our way through the local neighborhood. It soon became apparent, however, that we weren't bitten by a radioactive spider.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
With our sanity at an all-time low, there was only one thing that could help us: roids. Using our new beefed up body, we absolutely railed through some goofy looking mechs before making our way to Kalebo 3. It's a mystery what happened to Kalebo 1 and 2, but what I do know is that it only took about 3 seconds before I started to cheese kill these elite guards. This city also houses the second hoverboard race, and if there's one thing I learnt from our first one, it's that I had no chance of winning this on my first attempt. Wait, what? Why is Ratchet falling on his ass there? Wait, nothing even happened. I did manage to secure victory the second time around, only to get blown to shit on the grind rails when going for another golden bolt. To my horror, our pathetic skills didn't go unnoticed, as we're once again humbled at the sight of Clank securing another baddie for himself.
I'll see you later.
Bye, sweetie.
I think she likes me.
With the hologuise now in our possession, we were able to sneak our way into the secure area on Quartu. Eventually we reached the same shitbox from the opening cutscene, only to find out it's Clank's mum.
Mom?
Brother.
I tried, Mom.
Despite having witnessed our only friend being disowned by his own family, all we really cared about was Pothead's plan to annihilate our home planet. With our blood absolutely boiling, it was about time we ended this charade. And by charade, I meant our own life. Drek's fleet for the most part wasn't too challenging. I did however find myself in quite the predicament, as I was left on one hit with a gold bolt teasing me across a bunch of lasers. Past videos would have you think that I don't do well under pressure, but I'm a changed man. And after a 4-hour decompression session, I finally had the balls to attempt this long jump. Oof! Jesus Christ, didn't doubt myself for a single second. With my confidence restored, I looked to confront Pot of Greed, who'd used those 4 hours to Uber himself down to Veldon. Before following suit, however, I wanted to make sure that we'd collected every golden bolt and skill point first. This saw us travelling back to planets like Novalis and Quartu. The large majority of these gold bolts were easy enough to collect, although there were a good few that really tested my patience. The skill points followed a similar trend, with some being laughably easy, and others mimicking the feeling of getting fisted. I mean, not that I'd know. The hoverboard races were, without question, the toughest obstacle in my course for skill point perfection. The first one requires us to finish the race in under 1 minute 35 seconds, which frankly speaking, seemed impossible at first. I had raced multiple times without missing a single speed boost, and still, I hadn't come close to that 135 barrier. Our prospects had never looked so bleak, and after another few attempts, I really started to doubt if this shit was even possible. That's when it happened. A once-in-a-lifetime attempt. I was hitting all the shortcuts, all the speed boost. This was it. I was finally going to break that back. Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Dude, what do you need to do? Joking aside, we needed to abuse the jump feature on the hoverboard, which allowed us to skip larger parts of the track. Doing so consistently every lap gave us just enough leeway to clear that 135 barrier. This was no time to celebrate though, as this skill point had its very own toxic cousin waiting for us on Kalebo 3. Instead of a time limit though, this motherfucker required us to score over 4,500 points before the end of its race. Points are scored by doing tricks on your hoverboard. The more tricks you string together at once, the more points you get. Now luckily for my mental state, this one wasn't nearly as bad, although we did end up with multiple concussions attempting this. Outside of those 2 skill points though, the rest of them were fairly simple, and upon collecting our last one, it was time to shatter this pot of greed. Before doing so, however, I made sure to collect our last skill point, which saw us wrench slamming 10 of these elite guards. While this may sound annoying, their position in the air meant we'd have direct access to their nutsack, resulting in some devastating vasectomies. The rest of the planet was then cleared out using a combination of Visibomb cheese and sucking. It appears hand-to-hand combat is no one's strong suit in this galaxy, as our final showdown with Pot of Greed sees us facing off against a massive mech. After taking a few fire waves to the anus, we downloaded his attack panel. weapons and proceeded to start walloping his non-existent booty. With how smoothly this first attempt was going, it was only a matter of time before some bullshit fucking struck us from above. Not realizing we had the power to phase through literal rocks, we made sure to stay away from the edges of the arena as we face tanked our way to victory. With the pot of greed shattered, we let our intrusive thoughts win as we launch one final strike towards a planet that looks eerily similar to Earth, thus ending not only the game, but our lives. I'm only kidding, plot armor is real, and it's the reason we've been able to clear the game despite dying over 30 times. That said, we weren't done just yet. See, the moment you complete a Ratchet Clank game, you're teased with Challenge Mode, a new game plus far that lets you keep all your weapons, bolts, and certain gadgets. Now, despite its daunting name, I don't believe Challenge Mode adds any, well, challenge. The enemies remain the exact same, which is kind of strange considering we gain access to the gold variants of 10 weapons. As you can imagine, these pricey upgrades make for a much stronger arsenal, and using them we're able to blitz our way through challenge mode without much struggle. I'd actually started the game for a third time just to earn enough bolts for the Rhino, which stupidly enough was the last weapon I unlocked to 100% the game. Now believe it or not, I'd only died a few times when replaying the campaign. Most of them were, well, you know what caused them. Alas, we'd saved the galaxy twice at this point, and it only cost us 35 deaths, which is downright pathetic if we're being honest. There's no way we're gonna get bodied that many times in the following games, right? Going Commando picks up directly after its predecessor, yet despite our heroic deeds in the previous game, we couldn't be more washed up.
I guess no one needs a hero right now.
Considering how successful the first game was, however, Insomniac knew they needed to whip something out of their asses, and as sad as it is to say, begging for relevancy online seems to work just as well in this fictional galaxy as it does in our own, as we're immediately tasked with yet another life-threatening mission. Following a brutal 2-week bootcamp which has us learning things we'll never actually use, we're thrown into yet another introductory stage where I immediately creamed myself at just how much better this game felt. The absolute legends at Insomniac Games had somehow managed to craft a lock-on system that actually, well, locked on. This made clearing these initial enemies laughably easy, and before long, we'd come face to face with a villain that'd give my autistic ass a good run for its money.
Finish him.
As brain-dead as this display was, it did manage to stunlock us, allowing the thief to escape with the galaxy's first Furby. Shout out to those who know what that is. Wanting nothing more than to possess this cute furball for ourselves, we annihilate the remaining cannon fodder before following in hot pursuit. As we neared the next planet though, it became clear that we'd put in the wrong destination on our Maps app.
And I have no idea where he was headed.
Even so, a faint cry for help was all that was needed to get us running our way through these swamplands, and while the tentacle-equipped snails triggered my PTSD, we did eventually come to the rescue of this poor scientist. Wow. Well, fuck you too then. Realizing this was an elaborate game of hide and seek, we continuously followed the agonizing cries of death until we came across our first boss fight. It's also around this point where the game highlights one of the best additions to the entire franchise, strafing. Now this feature was technically in the first game as well, but instead of being a benefit to the player, this shit was so arse that it essentially sent you back to the last checkpoint the moment you tried using it.
Well, this sucks.
In Going Commando, however, this feature has been drastically improved, now allowing us to pull off dodges even Neo would be proud of. With these god-given abilities bestowed upon us, we ride these admittedly horrifying creatures across this lake of piss, spy the tractor beam of the struggling alcoholic, and collect our first platinum bolt. Now despite having moved up in rank, these things are essentially the same as their golden counterparts from the original. Alongside these 40 bolts, we'll also need to obtain 30 skill points, max out our health and armor, complete every arena challenge, space mission, and hoverbike race, as well as upgrade all 24 weapons to their ultra tier. With a collection of things to do as long as your mother's shopping list, there was no time to waste, and after playing a few rounds of Star Fox, we arrived at a gambling addict's wet dream. That said, this was no time for gambling, as we had more pressing matters to attend to, like missing every possible shot on this slingshot.
What are you aiming at?
While we were busy making a universal fool out of ourselves, Clank was busy pulling baddies. Although this time around, it was in a more literal sense. Learning of our friend's capture was certainly concerning, yet this soon became an afterthought as our Lancer evolved into the Heavy Lancer. Now as exciting as this moment was, it was short-lived, as I realized that using this weapon at all after this point would be a colossal waste of time. If we were to have any hope of leveling each of these weapons to their ultra variants within our current lifespan, then we were going to have to cycle our way through each one the moment they were upgraded. The good news is that most of the weapons are extremely fun to use. The chopper, for example, made short work of the introductory arena challenges, while the blitz gun absolutely decimated every Jurassic Park reject in sight. Now, as my ex would say about my friend downstairs, nothing's perfect, and the same could be said about a few of the game's weapons, but we'll get to the coma-inducing weapons later. For now, we just stuck with the fun yet ludicrous weapons. Wait, a mini nuke? Yeah, right.
2 seconds later.
Holy fuck, okay, they weren't joking. With another 2 weapons upgraded, our short detour to the planet Barlow came to an end as we hadn't collected the necessary gadgets to proceed yet. Unfortunately, this meant we'd have to go back and rescue Clank, which was less than ideal. Fortunately, this wasn't the hardest task, and after getting thoroughly duped by this random bot, we'd come to Clank's rescue. To my surprise, the million bolts shot through Clank's butt cheeks hadn't short-circuited his operating system, meaning we still had access to our trusty thruster pack. Now, all things considered, I was feeling fairly confident at this point. Not only had we avoided death for this long, but with our weapons upgrading and our health bar only getting larger, I just couldn't see how this game could ever test us. That's when this B-Tech Thanos pulled up in his very own chopper gunner, and while I did manage to get through this fight without dying, it couldn't have been closer. I hadn't realized it at the time, but enemy attacks weren't limited to just 1 point of damage anymore. And as we'll come to see, this damage can get absolutely ridiculous.
Holy look at all this damage!
Regardless, with Thanos clapped once again, we're given some relaxation time, which we spent marveling another duo of legends. While here, we picked up our old swing shot and grind boots, meaning we could return to Barlow to partake in some Tarzan-esque swinging. Along the way, we came across a pen of endangered Gadgetron hounds of cuddly death, and after making sure they were well and truly extinct, we stumbled across yet another scientist. Despite his stature and IQ, this dumbass had somehow frozen himself, meaning we had to administer our very own gut-wrenching blow. Impressed with our problem-solving skills, the scientist offers to sell us his Terminator for a discount, which we humbly accept. Using it, we're able to turn unwanted water sections into an even worse substitute. Wait, what the fuck? Realizing we'd been scammed, I wasted no time in trying to earn a quick buck, which saw us taking part in our first hoverbike race. Now, unlike its predecessor, Going Commando has the common decency of teaching us the vehicle's controls before throwing us into a life-threatening situation. Whether or not this actually helped is besides the point. We trade out our hoverbike for another session of Star Fox gaming, and while I remember vividly thinking, what the fuck, how did we even get here? It was a rather relaxing experience overall. This is also the first instance in which we can choose to complete other space-based missions. Now, considering my aim mimicked that of a stormtrooper, I decided against attempting these missions at this point, as we'll be able to upgrade our spacecraft later on. Instead, we tracked a course for the planet Notark, only to get immediately judged by a 4th wall break.
We always seem to be a bit late. Why is that?
The game must have noticed that my ego was at an all-time high, as this planet truly started to up the difficulty. Not only do the enemies blend in perfectly with the numerous mannequins, the fact I was using the blitz cannon didn't help, as it meant I had to get close enough to smell their putrid BO. Safe to say, this was probably my most autistic endeavor yet, as I was quite literally trying to take out a flying ship with a fucking shotgun. Questionable decisions aside, I had somehow managed to make my way into the local aquatic center without dying. What I hadn't realized though was the fact that each pool came armed with its very own shark thing. With our death count losing its virginity, things were only going to get worse as we're gaslit by our very own sidekick.
And they are willing to show it to us for a small price.
6,000 bolts? Small price, my fucking ass. We're then forced into the game's first snow planet. Yes, there's more than one. Now, as ominous as that statement sounds, this one isn't too bad. The enemies can't stand up to our minigun turrets, and the platinum bolts are simple enough to collect. Before long, we found ourselves on another train, and while the enemies here thrive on sneak attacks, we're no strangers to scummy tactics ourselves. This relaxing train ride ultimately leads us to Pound Town, but it's not us who's getting pounded, it's our masked friend here. Having dumpstered this absolute fraud, we rescued the abducted Furby, which was so awe-inspiring that Fizzwidget here couldn't contain himself.
Why, that's cutaneous! Absolutely munificent!
What?
Realizing the game would be far too overpriced if it ended here, Insomniac made sure we'd be ejected into a perfectly normal desert. Tabora is our first open-ended planet, where we're free to explore its vast wastelands. The main goal here is to collect these crystals, which isn't too bad as the enemies here, while massive in number, don't exactly do massive damage. There is a skill point linked to collecting all 100 crystals here, but with our mind solely focused on recapturing that Furby, this would have to wait. For now, we just grabbed 10 crystals as apparently that's all this crackhead needed to awaken his dormant powers. Not wanting to question what the fuck just happened, we glide our way down to a platinum bolt, winning multiple awards along the way. With a breakout performance like that, it was only right that we'd be considered amongst the galaxy's best gliders, a title we'd immediately lose as we continuously rammed our foreheads into a wall. Fuck me, I'm just shit, aren't I? Disappointed in our performance, we're required to pay off the maintenance bot's gambling debt, which put our remaining funds into life support.
This galaxy blows.
As if things couldn't get any worse though, we learned that Furby had gotten a taste for organic flesh. Feeling left out, Clank suggests we let the Furby have a little nibble of him, which all things considered was a terrible fucking idea. Realizing our partner had the IQ of a baked potato, we charted a course for the disposal facility in the hopes of getting rid of him once and for all. Unfortunately though, we were immediately cock-blocked by the true plot of this game, meaning we had to fight for our own life against the facility's defense systems. Now what I had thought to be an easy task soon turned out to be one of the most frustrating experiences yet. The task is rather straightforward. Destroy the 6 turrets before being blown to shit yourself. The problem though, is that the moment you destroy any of these turrets, a bot is sent out to repair it. So I guess that means we'll have to destroy all 6 turrets within a short time span. This was easier said than done, as my unupgraded blasters were doing about as much damage as a wet noodle. There were numerous moments where I'd be blasting the final turret just to see that infuriating message pop up. If I wasn't losing out on time, I'd just be getting fisted by the turret itself. I wish I could tell you how many attempts this shit took, but saying it out loud would most likely end up in my family disowning me. Tadano on the other hand was a relatively relaxing experience. We didn't have any troubles cooking these rapid rats, and the colossal robots couldn't seem to deal with our scummy tactics. The only challenge offered here came in the form of these infiltrator hacking segments. Essentially, you're supposed to memorize the specific pathways that lead to the starting node. Idiots on the other hand will spend whole ass minutes brute forcing their way to victory. Okay, I understand it now, Boom, 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 nope, boom, 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 nope, boom, 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 nope, boom, boom. Nah, for fuck's sake. This was also the first planet where we used our new spider glove. It might not allow us to swing through the local neighborhood, but it can spawn a little mechanical spider which we can guide through these ventilation shafts. This leads to a small button which when stood on opens a hidden chamber that contains another platinum bolt. It's a good thing that this is a stupid little gadget and not a weapon we'll have to spend 80 years upgrading, right? Not wanting to dwell on that thought, we make our way to Boldan, where we get hit by almost every obstacle along this grind rail. This left us in quite the precarious situation, as we'd completed what would amount to fuck all on this planet. Not wanting to pad our death count, I did what any other pussy would do in our situation.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
Now this decision was so deplorable that it actually resulted in us being locked up. That said, with how many baddies Clank's pulled during his lifetime, it wouldn't faze me if at least one of them had ended up in prison themselves. Yep, there she is. Ignoring the fact that she was in for mass murder, we take this chance to sneak our way through the back rooms as Clank. These sections are never that hard, although going commando did spice them up by introducing new bots and synergies between them. Having freed ourselves from prison, we watch in confusion as our enemies throw themselves into the literal pits of hell. Unfazed, we grab our final wrench upgrade, show off our god tier platforming skills, and levitate our way to a familiar looking arse. As weird as it was to see this guy here, the more perplexing matter was how he thought anyone would buy this piece of shit for 20,000 bolts. I think I'd rather force myself to sit through one of my own videos before I'd ever buy this thing. Unfortunately, we will have to pick up this turd ball eventually, as it is required to hit 100%. For now though, our endless Amazon orders had left us completely broke, giving us the perfect excuse to avoid contaminating our hands. That said, being broke wasn't ideal, as we couldn't even afford a new set of clothes. Armor was another new addition added in Going Commando, and it's arguably the most important one when it comes to staying alive. That said, we must be closeted masochists, as we were still rocking the tetrafiber armor on one of the final planets. As you can imagine, every hit we took at this point felt like a supercharged kick to the nuts, yet even this paled in comparison to the pain suffered during our next boss fight. In the hopes of rescuing our tall Queen Angela, we're tasked with facing off against the Giganto mech, whose name, contrary to popular belief, has nothing to do with its size. Instead, this thing's a Giganto waste of time, as we're forced to dash around this massive arena, jumping from turret to turret as we slowly whittle his HP down. I'd say this fight is one of the only misses in an otherwise legendary sequel. Now, Despite having spent over 10 minutes fighting to rescue her, Angela rejects our confession of love, but assures us that it has nothing to do with our height difference. Heartbroken, we turn to drugs as our solace, only to realize they'd never been shipped. Confused, we fly our way on over to the shipping bay, only to find our nearly endless supply of crack gone. In their place were these goddamn snappers, and with 2 heads each, it was no wonder how our supply was cleared out at record speeds. Furious, we made sure to personally slip a spider up each of their nostrils as we cleared a path to multiple platinum bolts as well as our first hypnotic part. On our path to rediscover ourselves, we receive a video message from Angela. And would you look at that, it seems she needs rescuing once again. What she doesn't realize is that we're no simp. There's no way we'd fly all the way to another planet just to rescue. As embarrassing as this was, being a simp was the least of our worries. See, outside of rescuing Angela, our main goal on Grelbin was to amass a certain amount of moonstones, just like we had done on Tabora. The only difference was that these icy wastelands were inhabited by a seemingly endless supply of furries. Not only that, but the massive ice of islands did more than half our total HP with a single hit from their beams, making them the most lethal enemies we'd encountered so far. Thankfully, we only needed to collect 9 moonstones to progress the story, meaning we could come back during challenge mode too.
No! God, please, no! No!
Safe to say, we were in for a colossal beating, as we got continuously fisted for 20 minutes straight. Getting gangbanged by Yetis was one thing, but what felt even worse was knowing that we'd been losing out on bolts the entire time. Whoever designed the stage was a true sadist, as they made sure that each of these Yetis would only drop like 60 bolts each. On the other hand, we'd have to spend at least double that in ammunition just to kill a single one, meaning our broke ass only got broker. While this experience completely fucked our death counter, it did make the following segments feel much easier in comparison, although the constant reminder of our financial situation certainly wasn't appreciated. In an attempt to accrue more bolts, we made our way back to the Mukhtar Resort, where we established ourselves as a dominant force in the arena challenges. Considering how strong we were at this point, none of these challenges were too difficult, and before long we jumbled together enough bolts to afford the Duraplate armor. Even with this armor though, I'd still shit myself at the thought of those Yetis, so instead we made our way to planet Damozel, which had apparently been overrun by Furbies. The resulting stage saw us cleaning up the streets, which did see quite a few honourable sacrifices being made. The level itself wasn't too bad though, as these small critters were extremely susceptible to being turned into sheep. The mech battle was just like any other, where we spammed our way to victory, and the grind rail segment was surprisingly easy with our new yes men clearing the way. Alas, everything must come to an end, and after reaching this park, we were once again reminded that we'd need to grab that final hypnotic park from Grelbin eventually. Not wanting to spend any longer here than we had to, I made it my goal to blitz our way through these icelands, avoiding as many Yetis as possible. As you'd expect, we still got royally fucked doing this, but our new armor did help immensely in mitigating the damage taken. And while we did flirt with death quite a bit, we were able to trade in another 16 moonstones without adding too many deaths to our counter. With the hypnotic in our possession, it was about time we rescued Angela back on Grelbin, but because we're petty, I thought we'd finish up these space missions first. These challenges can be separated into a few different categories. You've got your standard elimination missions, unique one-off missions, and finally the race missions. The large majority of these are extremely easy, that is until you get to the races. These missions have us competing in a race against the galaxy's ace pilot. The course itself is loosely outlined by these rings, and you don't even have to hit each one of them to win the challenge itself. The platinum bolts, on the other hand, require you to hit every single ring during those races, which was easier said than done. I assure you, I was sober when attempting these races, although I wouldn't blame you for thinking I downed 14 bottles of tequila beforehand. With another 10 deaths donated to the counter, we finished collecting every platinum bolt before making our way back to Tabora. Despite Angela's life hanging in the balance, we needed more bolts, and after another 20 minutes or so, we'd not only collected every single crystal, but another skill point as well. Now, considering we'd wasted close to an hour flying around like an inbred caterpillar, there was no guarantee that Angela was still alive. Even so, we trusted in the power of plot armor, and after fending off a final set of Furbies, we reunited with an unharmed Angela. She gives us the coordinates of the factory where they make these Furbies, and as tempting as raiding this factory was, there were still quite a few skill points we needed to collect. Now, most of these were fairly straightforward, like partaking in some animal cruelty or beating the shit out of the thug leader using only our fists. As you probably could have guessed, the only skill points I really struggled with were the vehicle races. Instead of flying through rings though, this time it was all about speed, which wouldn't have been too bad had I not been getting blown to shit by my opponents.
break an opponent's lock on you, move your bike sharply to the left and right.
It took a few attempts, but we did finally earn ourselves the Speed Demon trophy, meaning we could move on to the Impossible challenge, which saw us battling through a grueling 60 rounds of AIDS. Now, all things considered, we were more than capable of doing this. The hardest part was conserving ammo, as there weren't too many ammo crates throughout the challenge. Even so, we did manage to complete this challenge on our first attempt, and by this point, there were only 4 skill points we didn't have. 3 of them were pretty standard, as we'd simply earned them while playing through challenge mode. The last one though, required us to mine every single moonstone on Grelbin, which wasn't going to fucking happen. At least not at the moment. With that said, it was about time we raided this Furby factory on Yidil. By this point, we'd picked up Gucci's latest armor set, meaning the damage we took in this final planet was negligible. Saving the galaxy was one thing, but more importantly, we made sure not to miss the final platinum bolt, as this would earn us yet another trophy. Now, as surprising as Quark's reveal was, I couldn't help but be amazed at Angela's language following it.
Alright, just what the f is going on?
Quark, being the dumbass that he is, immediately gets himself eaten by this mutated Furby, and it looks like it's up to us to save the day once again. This final boss fight is more about attrition than anything else. The guy is incredibly tanky, and we were quickly running out of ammo on all of our guns. By the time we defeated him, I wasn't just on my final gun, but also my final health point. Holy shit. Not even close. A win's a win though, and following the removal of Quark's genitals, we're once again offered to play through the game in challenge mode. This was where the game truly flourished in my opinion. Not only do we gain access to the mega variants of all our weapons, but this iteration of challenge mode also introduces the bolt multiplier, which stacks up to 20 the more enemies that you kill. As you can imagine, this makes farming bolts extremely fun, although you do lose that multiplier anytime you're hit by an enemy. The enemies are also said to be far tougher in this mode. While I did feel like they did more damage, our beefy health bar and designer armor seemed to deflect a good chunk of it. Our main focus during the second playthrough though was to simply level each weapon to its ultra tier. This was fairly simple for most weapons, and we were able to upgrade most of them just by playing through the campaign again. Along the way, we maxed out our nanotech, fully upgraded our ship, and even collected every moonstone on Grelbin, which just so happened to be the only place I died on our second playthrough. The rematch against our Furby friend was also a complete cakewalk thanks to the Rhino 2, and we once again completed every space mission, arena challenge, and hoverbike race. All that remained for 100% was to upgrade one last weapon. The Spiderbot glove was by far the worst weapon to upgrade. I spent what felt like fucking hours running the same spider up enemies' assholes. At some point I realized I could just use other weapons to lower the HP before using the spider to finish them off, but I still felt like I'd rather be doing anything else than this shit. That said, we did eventually upgrade our glove to the Tankbot glove, which gave us our final skill point and multiple trophies. All that was left now was to pay a visit to the Insomniac Museum, which earned us the Platinum Trophy. He went commando. What started as a relaxing experience soon turned into a humbling one, as we died a total of 43 times while going for 100%. All that remains is to see how the final game in the trilogy holds up. I doubt it could be as hard as this was. Thankfully, it seems as though our galaxy-saving efforts didn't go unnoticed the second time around, as the game not only starts up in our very own penthouse, but Clank seems to have gotten his own TV series. Unfortunately for us though, we've somehow been shoehorned into the shitty reoccurring character role, who's neither relevant nor interesting enough for anyone to remember. Butthurt at the fact that a literal robot is getting more action than we are, we flick to the shittiest news service on air, which just so happens to be reporting the annihilation of our home planet. Now, if we're being honest, considering we are rich and famous now, we couldn't give less of a shit about this worthless planet, but realizing the alternative was having to watch another episode of Agent Clank, we immediately packed our bags and set out for Veldin. Upon landing, it became clear to us that these galactic rangers were getting their asses kicked. Fortunately for them though, we've got 2 whole games under our belt, meaning we had no problem decimating these alien motherfuckers. Before long, we were letting these dumbass rangers tank missiles for us as we dive bombed our way towards another battlefield. As is the case with most tutorial levels, the enemies here weren't too threatening. One thing I did notice was that our health had turned itself into a number, and to max it out, we'd have to raise it to 200. Alongside this, we'd have to collect 40 titanium bolts, 30 skill points, max out our armor, obtain all 15 in-game trophies, as well as upgrade all 20 weapons to their Omega tier. Waffling aside, we're humbled for the 81st time before getting information surrounding a supposed superhero. Bro, I swear if this is Quark or something.
Legend tells that this
oh, for fuck's sake, it is, man.
Actually one of the greatest superheroes who ever lived.
Stop the cap.
Either way, with nothing else to go off, we chart a course for Florana, where we pick up one of the coolest weapons to ever grace the franchise. Florana introduces a few new things, mainly the Bolt Multiplier crate as well as the new Inferno mode. The Bolt Multiplier crate doubles our current multiplier, while Inferno mode makes it so we can take a nuclear missile straight to the crotch without feeling a thing. Now, as powerful as that sounds, I hardly ever use this mode, as it seemed to be a surefire way of never leveling any of our weapons. What I will say is that this is a far more exciting first planet than its predecessors, and while the enemies were getting fucking shit on, their attack patterns and numbers did keep me on my toes. My cocky attitude soon caught up to me though, as we're tasked with finding our way through the path of death. And as corny as that name sounds, it wasn't lying, as I died in what may go down as the most brain-dead way possible.
Oh fuck me, no I'm lagging.
The rest of the path didn't pose much of a problem, which could also be said about this washed up hero. One look at this guy and it became obvious that his genitals weren't the only things removed at the end of going commando, as this doofus couldn't even understand a thing we were saying. With Quark's cheeks well and truly clapped, we get a call from our new crush who tells us that should we let Quark continue to think that he's a monkey, it would be an utter disgrace to their entire species. Having watched Planet of the Apes, we decided it would be for the best to get this failure back in semi-working order, which ultimately saw us docking at the Starship Phoenix. This is the first time one of these games has had its own little base of operations, and as you can tell from the map screen, there's quite a few rooms for us to explore. For now, we let Quark get comfortable in his new cell before testing out the VR deck, which are essentially just easier arena challenges disguised as VR tests. Eventually, we end up on the bridge where we first lay eyes on this devious mastermind.
Robotic citizens of the Solana Galaxy, the hour of your liberation is at hand!
Convinced this was yet another fraud wearing a villain skin, we touched down in Marcadia, which just so happened to be the first planet to feature enemies that had respectable range. Even so, we're elite heroes at this point, and after collecting our first titanium bolt, we linked back up with the Galactic Rangers. Realizing they were in the presence of Clank's personal chauffeur, the Rangers couldn't help but beg for our help in securing the area, and while I was hesitant at first, one look at the prize fund had me completing not one, not two, but all 5 additional challenges. These operations ranged in difficulty from extremely easy to still pretty easy. Most of them just had us holding the line for a certain amount of time, or until a certain number of waves had been cleared, and while I did worry about my ammo reserves a few times, none of them lasted long enough to truly cause us any problems. In what can only be described as a sick joke at this point, we were immediately humbled yet again by the president, who immediately sucks off Clank's non-existent dick, all while telling us we've got zero chance with his daughter.
Don't get any ideas, kid, she is way out of your league.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
Worst yet, but this guy seems to think that Quark is the key to defeating Dr. Nefarious. It's a real wonder how he ever became president in the first place. Either way, before returning to the Starship Phoenix, there's one last area we can check out. Now, despite being called the Laser Defense Facility, it's done an awful job of defending itself, as this place was crawling with Monster Inc. rejects. The good news is that these are the exact same enemies we've been plastering throughout the early game, meaning they didn't put up much of a fight here either. Having maxed out our brain power to solve these Olympiad-tiered puzzles, we meet with Al, who gives us our first Quark vid comic. These comics act as short 2D platformer levels in which we play as Quark in somewhat questionable scenarios. This first volume isn't too tough, but with only 5 hits allowed, it can get pretty dicey at times. There are also 100 Quark tokens for us to collect, and doing so will reward us with a titanium bolt, so it's important that we keep our eyes peeled, as there are usually a good few that are well hidden within each stage. Now, the downside of playing through this comic was that it helped spark a lightbulb moment in Quark's head, and within moments, he was back to being the king of cringe.
Well, who's that handsome devil?
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Not wanting to be anywhere near him, we make a getaway for the Annihilation Nation, which, true to its name, immediately annihilated any aura we had.
He hopes that disguising himself as a Tyrannoid will make him more attractive to the ladies.
With our ego well and truly decimated, we'd have to pick ourselves up as we had a rather treacherous obstacle course to get through. Along the way, we snagged yet another titanium bolt before finding ourselves in our first combat arena. Here we had to fight through multiple waves of enemies, which wasn't too bad as there were plenty of ammo crates that spawned throughout the gauntlet. And despite winning it all, it was becoming increasingly obvious that we were now the galaxy's punching bag.
How about that, folks? He is better looking.
With a fire well and truly lit under our asses, we look to assert our dominance by completing as many arena challenges as possible. Now, for the most part, we were smashing our way through these, although there was one that was quite frankly impossible for us to complete at this stage.
Weapons now. Oh, I just lose.
With the dream of a deathless run shattered, we returned to the Starship Phoenix where we were jump scared by what could be considered the worst superhero squad to ever exist. Nicknamed the Q-Force, this questionable bunch may as well have been spectators, as we're the ones that have to do everything. Before we dive into what could be considered our first suicidal mission, we decided to blow off some steam by playing through our second volume of Quark's vidcomic series. This volume was in fact a bit harder than the first one, as it featured more time segments and moving platforms. It also had some well hidden tokens, as it took me 2 attempts to find them all. That said, we'd stalled for long enough, and after picking up our first set of armor, we dove down to a Quatos. Now, outside of the possibility of seeing Aquaman down here, there really wasn't too much to this planet. The enemies were easy enough to deal with, and the pathways being linear made it easy enough to spot the titanium bolts. That said, this was the first time I'd seen enemies who could literally phase out of existence.
What the fuck?
The biggest surprise though was finding out about Slim Cognito's dark past.
I had a small run-in with the cops concerning a suck cannon upgrade that was mistakenly sold to a miner.
What the fuck? Bro, I can't believe what I've just heard. It's Slim Diddy.
Disgusted by his actions, we refused to pay a single bolt for his weapons and instead looked to infiltrate Dr. Nefarious' underwater base. This acts as our first Clank segment, and this time we've got our very own sidekick in the form of, well, this guy. While Clank sends Scrunch off to die, Ratchet seems to be suffering from food poisoning as he can't stop burping while trying to speak to these guards. Amazingly though, we were able to fool these idiots into thinking we spoke fluent Taiwanese. And just like that, we'd infiltrated Dr. Nefarious' office. Now while we didn't find much in relation to what his evil plans were, we did discover that he was a massive fan of Agent Clank, as well as his, well, let's just say unique kinks.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
With so much on our minds, it's a good thing we spent the next 18 business days dropping into who knows what. Having entered a short coma, we do eventually end up drifting down a stream of strange liquid, which we soon learn is...
This here is one of the nastiest, smelliest sewers in the galaxy.
In reality though, this is this game's iteration of Greblin, where we need to mine sewer crystals. Thankfully, we don't have to deal with Yetis anymore, and instead have a pretty relaxing time dusting off countless amoeboids. Not wanting to pass away from boredom though, I only cleared out the first segment of the sewers, which did earn us a nice chunk of bolts, which we immediately exchanged for a set of adamantine armor. This armor set couldn't have come at a better time, as our next mission saw us diving straight into enemy rocket fire once again. As thanks for the warm welcome, we made sure to return the favour. And return the favour we did, as we made our way around the island destroying each turret where it lay. We eventually end up facing off against another intern from Monsters Inc., and if nothing else, this guy was incredibly tanky. That said, he doesn't seem to know what the fuck he's supposed to be shooting at.
Nice.
Either way, with another threat eliminated, we waste no time gloating about our achievements only to get interrupted by Dr. Nefarious himself. Despite his best efforts to be intimidating, knowing what we do about his kinks certainly makes him seem less threatening. That said, we still had to track down the source of this transmission, which took us to a planet named Dax. This planet features a lot of long sightlines, which was perfect as we just purchased the Flux Rifle. This meant we could pick off enemies without them ever fighting back. Our journey to explore the docks was a bit more chaotic though, as we were constantly bombarded by this asshole in a fighter jet. Thankfully, we're given a chance to rinse his ass, and with only 2 attack patterns, this guy was going down easy. What wasn't easy however was the branching pathway that led to another titanium bolt.
Oh man.
For whatever reason, I couldn't seem to reach this platform on my first 2 attempts, although I did eventually grab this goddamn bolt. Following this, we completed a few Mario Galaxy levels, helped defend Blackwater City, and outplayed a brain-powered boss by throwing ourselves into the lava. This victory not only got us our 3rd Quark comic, but also a chance with Courtney Gears. All we had to do was not fumble it.
It is an honor for you to meet me. To meet you, Miss Gears. Hi. Hi.
Having confirmed a lack of any aura, we took in some of the best elevator music known to man, before making our way to Holostar Studios where things would go from bad to worse.
Take up basket weaving, you're fired!
With Ratchet experiencing the biggest fall-off in mascot history, it seems it was up to Clank to carry the rest of this game.
2 seconds later.
I have a present for you, Snooky Wookums.
Noticing that our partner hadn't returned for our daily viewing of Love Island, we vowed to find out what's happened, stopping for only the most crucial of things.
Wait a minute!
On a more serious note though, this stage is the first to introduce the Noid Commanders, which are some of the toughest enemies in the entire game. They not only do incredible damage, but their fire rate and reload speed makes it extremely hard to get in and do damage to them, as it seems like they're always firing. Even so, after fighting our way through multiple commanders, we meet back up with Clank, who can't seem to stop judging us for some reason. Bro, why is he looking at us like that? Before we even get the chance to report anything though, we witness firsthand as Skidmark is battered for owning a piece of Courtney Gear's merch. Wanting that limited edition shirt for ourselves, we fly our way on over to the most complex stage in the entire game. Joking aside, this is more of a platforming stage than anything else, as the enemies here are extremely basic. The hardest part is honestly just understanding how far you have to jump to avoid most of these obstacles. The boss fight against Courtney Gears in comparison is extremely underwhelming. I wasn't even sure what the fuck she was doing, as her backup dancers were just getting plastered by her endless mini turrets. Her own personal attacks were also incredibly easy to avoid, and as usual, after a few seconds with her, we were ready to wrap things up.
What do you mean by that?
Despite the easy fight, it didn't change the fact that Dr. Nefarious had a means of turning us into robots, and fearing for our lives, we turned towards the only one who'd allegedly beaten him, only to find out that he'd been sleeping with literal monkeys.
It was mating season. How could I have known she was your sister?
This was the last straw, and after trying to end ourselves, we fight off a bunch of Darth Maul impersonators before deciding to leave Quark for dead as we narrowly escaped the ship's explosion. With the weight lifted off our shoulders, we pretend to give a shit at his memorial before loading up the 4th volume of his comic series. It's here where we learn the true origin of the beef between Dr. Nefarious and Quark, and you won't believe it, but these guys have been fighting over who had the biggest head amongst them.
What did he say?
This reveal was so shocking that I had several brain aneurysms while playing through the comic, all of which cost me my life. Most of my deaths came while facing Dr. Nefarious himself, as he's got quite the range on his claws. That said, after another 3 deaths or so, I just figured you could spam punch your way to victory, which somehow worked. Having successfully figured out where Nefarious would strike next, we make our way to Metropolis, only to witness the Death Star turn every Tyrannoid into a robot. Considering we're standing right next to this particular one, it's anyone's guess how we didn't fall victim to its magical powers. Alas, with our organs still intact, we snipe our way through the courtyard, ultimately leading us to our first in-game trophy. These trophies are an interesting case, as half of them are found out in the wild, while others are earned by reaching certain milestones. We've definitely missed a good few of these, but with the fate of the galaxy in our hands, we couldn't afford to backtrack just yet. Now, in hindsight, this was probably the smart idea, as it didn't take long for us to get absolutely flattened by these new robotic commanders. The sheer number of these motherfuckers was honestly astounding, and to think they'd sneak up on us when we've got absolutely no cover to use. For the first time during this entire playthrough, we had to take things slow, as rushing into these fights would only fast track our name to the top of the Darwin Awards. After some methodical play, we reached our caged friend, but if we were going to have any chance of freeing him, we were going to have to deal with his roided up twin brother. Now, the big bright health bar in the bottom corner would have you think that this was a boss fight, but after a few shots to the forehead with the flux rifle, he was down for the count. After saving Clank, we make sure to rub in how much of a failure he is before helping the Galactic Rangers with another few operations. The final one rewards us with the Map-O-Manic, which we can use to see hidden paths on our map. With it, we're able to navigate these sewers, and while we didn't clear the whole area out, it did result in another nice chunk of bolts, which we once again used to buy the latest set of designer clothes. Started to the high heavens, we dropped down onto planet Zeldin, where we not only collected the easiest titanium bolt to ever exist, but we also looked to win the most brain-dead death award with this next play.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
It appears the toxic radiation in those sewers had melted what little brain power I had left, as we spent the next 10 minutes spam blasting our way through our enemies. Eventually we stumbled across an escape pod that not only contained a recently used testicle scratcher, but a far more concerning recording.
Supernova tech.
Apart from the undeniable need for bleach, it was obvious that Quark had used his video to distract us. Not falling for it, we looked to blast our way through the remaining gravity section only to miss every conceivable shot on what may be the largest enemy in the entire game. Following this pathetic display, we're promptly banned from using any firearms until we complete the 5th and final chapter of Quark's comic series. Having initially thought this would be like every other volume, it soon became apparent that our dogship plays mimicked a more lore-accurate version of Quark. This comic was leagues above the rest in terms of difficulty. The fact that there was constantly rising acid means you hardly get any time to think, which makes collecting every token an even more stressful endeavour. Not only that, but the enemies seem to predict where you'll jump, meaning you'll oftentimes just jump straight into their torpedoes. I must have died at least 5 times while attempting to get this titanium bolt, But a win's a win, and with the final comic completed, it was high time we paid Quark a visit. Before we could get to him though, we had to fight our way through an army of Quark deepfakes, and seeing how creepy they looked as an exoskeleton, I was thankful they were fully clothed. Either way, Quark must have known we were coming. Either that, or he didn't want anyone to smell the putrid odour coming from his room, as he'd blocked it off entirely with a barrier. Now, as any dictator will tell you, sacrifices must be made for the greater good, so off Clank went deep into the underground caverns where he immediately iced himself out. Having cooled his head, we're able to use these skills we picked up when filming Agent Clank to destroy the barrier leading to Quark's bedroom. Surprisingly though, it seems the 48-page roast doc we'd prepared wasn't going to be needed, as Quark essentially told us that he was too much of a pussy to show his face in public anymore. This was the best news we'd heard in years, and running this high, we had no trouble taking out the Dark Sith's forces, as we powered our way to the bridge. Having confirmed everyone of importance was still alive and well, we headed off to Koros, which soon became our ideal farming spot. Now, you'd think the penultimate planet would come with its fair share of tough enemies, but Insomniac is always 2 steps ahead. So instead, they just loaded this place with some absolute cannon fodder, both in the form of these brain-dead guards as well as these massive Gundam units that can't seem to shoot straight. With Dr. Nefarious' whole squadron obliterated, we gained access to the latest steel lab chair, which apparently came with its own turret. Now, despite Clank's attempt to aura farm,
after all those hollow films, there is one thing you should know by now. Do not mess with Agent Clank.
We learned that Dr. Nefarious has an even larger base. Worse yet, it also had its own Death Star, meaning we weren't due for our Christmas break just yet. That said, there were still quite a few skill points and titanium bolts we had to obtain, so I guess saving the galaxy would have to wait for now. Much like their predecessor, these skill points ranged in difficulty from incredibly easy to making me want to dive bomb into an active volcano. Autistic plays were one thing, but the idea that we had to complete these goddamn Quark comics within a certain time frame shook me to my very core. In response, I just started running through them without a single thought entering my brain, and while this did work for the majority of them, it didn't exactly bode well for the final comic. Now, despite being the self-proclaimed president of Quark's hate group, I had to admit that even I was getting sick of watching this bum die over and over again. Ironically enough though, the moment I had that thought was the exact moment I got that final skill point from these comics. The only other skill points to offer a challenge were some of the arena fights, mainly the ones that forced us to complete them without taking damage.
Oh my god, are you fucking serious? That just happened?
Whether it was bullshit like you just saw or blatant skill issues, this proved to be one of the few challenges that offered, well, a challenge. By this point, we'd collected every titanium bolt up until the last planet, and we'd obtained every skill point except for the one earned by buying the Infernox armor, which we couldn't afford. We'd also grabbed the last remaining in-game trophies, meaning the only ones we had left to collect were the ones that were awarded to us once we hit certain milestones. Now, considering we'd spent a good few hours completing all these side objectives, it was a miracle that the whole galaxy hadn't been turned into robots yet. Even so, there was still a 2.1% chance it had happened, so off we went to Mylon where we picked up our final titanium bolt. Despite hearing rumours of a massive robot army guarding this command center, we must have come during their lunch break, as there was hardly a soul in sight. Regardless, it was apparent that Dr. Nefarious would be here, and after wiping the floor with his elite guard, it was only right that we do the same to him. Now, as much as it pains me to say, but this guy was far tougher than I was expecting. Sure, he doesn't have that many attack patterns, but they are surprisingly quick, to the point where I almost fist bumped death on the first phase. I also didn't expect to have to fight through a few waves of enemies to reach his second phase, although this was one of the only moments where I could heal myself in peace. His second phase is where he really shines though, as he'll start to layer certain attacks on top of each other, making it even harder to avoid. That said, once we've seen them all, you'll have realized that you can pretty much avoid all of them just by running around the arena in a circle while strafing. He may be incredibly tanky, but we're no Captain Quark. Predicting his pathetic defeat, it seems as though Nefarious had one last ace up his sleeve. An ace that was entirely countered by strafing in one direction for 2 minutes.
Wait, is this how this boss ends?
Yep, it is. Anyway, with the goofiest yet best villain defeated, we finally got that Christmas break, which we spent making sure our partner's latest movie didn't flop completely. Unfortunately for the crew though, this Christmas break lasted for about as long as the credits, as we're immediately tempted into starting challenge mode. Naming conventions aside, the real challenge going forward was always going to be leveling each and every weapon to their Omega tier. That being said, with the Bolt Multiplier making a reappearance, it didn't take long for me to purchase the Infernox armor, awarding us with our final skill point. With our body now covered in solidified pizza toppings, it was only right that we blitzed our way through the second playthrough at record speeds. By the time we'd reached Mylon again, I'd essentially upgraded our entire arsenal, and I'd done this using a very specific strategy. See, while I was running through Chorus during challenge mode, I came to realize just how many bolts we were getting just by destroying every local business in the site. Not only that, but these massive hunks of uselessness also gave a surprisingly large chunk of weapon XP, meaning we were not only leveling our weapons here, but we were getting rich while doing so. This planet became my new home for a good hour or two as I cycled my way through our entire arsenal until we had fully maxed out every weapon. This paired with us maxing out our nanotech from earlier had awarded us with every in-game trophy there was to get. Now technically this is all that's required for 100%, but because it was so easy to farm bolts in this game, I thought I might as well get the platinum trophy as well, which required us to amass a whopping 10 million bolts. Yet as daunting as that sounds, all it took was a few more runs through Chorus. Thus ends our 100% journey of Up Your Arsenal, and with that, it's about time we ranked each of these games in terms of Wait, who the fuck is that? Yeah, so at first I was just planning on covering the original trilogy, but as I said earlier, this series is often segregated into its own sagas, and Deadlocked, despite being a very different game as we'll come to see, is technically a direct sequel to Up Your Arsenal. So yeah, I mean, let's just get into it. Now before even jumping into this game, we're forced into selecting a difficulty, which is a first for the franchise. Now considering the game automatically opened on the contestants difficulty, I just decided to keep it at that level, as I assume that's what the game considers its normal mode. If it's not, well, feel free to rinse me in the comments. Either way, the game opens with the Galactic Hunger Games, where we see an absolute amateur get what he deserves as he's blasted up the ass by Ace Hardon. Yes, that's what we're going to be calling him throughout this entire video. Back on the Starship Phoenix, we'd successfully slept our way to the position of Fleet Captain, which couldn't be less believable as we're still a bumbling mess in the presence of the opposite gender.
Well, long time no see. So Metropolis still in one piece, huh?
Greetings, Captain.
Alas, no one seemed to be interested in our lack of aura, as there were more pressing matters to attend to, namely the fact that that amateur we saw at the start of the game was actually a well-known hero. Sasha fills us in on Dread Zone, an underground combat tournament whose streams are locked behind a $50 subscription fee. Having saved the galaxy 3 times already, it was anyone's guess as to how we hadn't been invited yet, and if I'm being honest, it was getting borderline offensive.
Unidentified craft approaching.
Now that's more like it. Following a short cutscene where we lay eyes on this adorable, slug thing, we awake to the sight of our withered drill. Having shit ourselves immediately, we're forced to fester in our own feces as we're immediately thrown into the game's tutorial. Deadlocked, for the most part, plays pretty similarly to its predecessors, although there is one major change. Strafing is no longer bound to a button, and instead will automatically apply itself when we have our weapons out. As you'd expect, this tutorial was a complete breeze, and following its completion, we're told by Vox that should we want out of this place, we'd have to fight our way to the top. Concerningly though, any attempt at stealing that adorable slug thing would immediately result in a taser shock to the testicles. With the boundaries clearly defined, we meet up with Al, who introduces us to our new bodyguards. We'll be able to upgrade these guys throughout the course of the game, and as we'll come to see, this is both to our benefit and our detriment.
Ah, stop stealing my kills, motherfucker.
Either way, after talking to Clank for a bit, we entered the Battle Dome for the first time, and if this place wasn't going to kill us, then the dogshit cutscenes would.
We'll see.
What the fuck is going on? What did I just see?
This first arena challenge is a complete joke, which is a good thing, considering my eyes were still recovering from the copious amounts of bleach injected into them. All things considered though, this mission does a good job of introducing some of our bodyguard's special abilities, namely the EMP, which is used to disable shields on larger targets. Having completed this first challenge, a pop-up screen appears showing things like the time taken and how many enemies we'd killed. What really drew my eye, however, was the number of skill points attached, and with my curiosity building, I just had to know, how many did we actually have to obtain?
What? Nah.
Yeah, so this game has more skill points in it than the first 3 games combined. Not only that, but if we want to 100% this game, we'll need to level our health to 100, earn 400,000 dread points, upgrade every weapon to its omega tier, and most concerningly, beat the entire game on exterminated difficulty, which isn't even unlocked until we beat the game for the first time. With our work well and truly cut out for us, there was no time to waste as we immediately flew on over to Catacrom 4. Immediately, we get a taste of what Deadlock truly is, a fun fucking game. Each planet in this game is separated into multiple challenges that vary in terms of their objectives. Some require us to scout the area in hopes of finding something, while others have us piloting massive mechs as we shred our way through whatever pathetic resistance force Vox could come up with. As you can imagine, the overall difficulty varies from challenge to challenge, although I wouldn't really say any of the ones on CARICROM 4 were too tough. Having blitzed our way through the first set of challenges, we're then introduced to the Dread challenges, which I initially believed were going to be harder versions of the challenges we'd already completed. That said, I still wouldn't consider these particular Dread challenges to be any harder than the normal ones. Unlike its predecessor, the vehicles are far easier to get the hang of, and while there seemed to be an influx of zombie enemies borrowing from the underground, all this did was help us level our weapons at a faster rate. Apart from working our way to that 400,000 Dread point barrier, it's important that we complete these challenges as we need to earn a certain amount to compete in the next tier of the Dread Zone tournament. That said, we're definitely getting ahead of ourselves here, as to any regular viewer of these games, we were still very much cannon fodder. In the hopes of changing that perception, we threw ourselves into the acidic pits of hell, where we fought against massive Leviathan tails. The more challenges we completed, the more I relied on my bodyguards. These guys were the real MVPs, as we could essentially ask them to complete all the important objectives while we could focus on the most important one, having fun. Before long, our impressive performances had earned us our very own luxury car, which we immediately took for a test drive. With our dogshit driving skills exposed to the whole galaxy, it was time to lock in, and with our new mounted turret, we had no problems fucking up this mechanized crab. With our confidence restored, we looked to take on the king of Leviathans, who was quite the tanky motherfucker. Thankfully, our bodyguards were distracting him with their unorthodox movement patterns, and after a long 17 years, we finally defeated him with a skill point to boot. After another relaxing drive through the countryside and what technically another Dread challenge, we learn of our first real roadblock, Shell Shock. But before we get to face off against him, we had to get rid of his annoying henchmen, as well as his own personal aircraft. Infuriated, Shellshock decides to deal with us himself.
Wait, come back! What the fuck?
Yeah, so this is actually the first of 3 fights we'll be having with Shellshock. Now, I'm not sure about this guy, but giving my opponents 2 whole rounds of fight data doesn't exactly sound like a winning strategy, and this couldn't be more true, as by the time we faced him for real, we knew exactly how to avoid all of his attacks. Having exterminated the first exterminator, we're technically allowed to enter the Avenger tournament. Before that though, we had a little confrontation with Ace Hardon, who seemed to get one at the sheer thought of killing other heroes.
Traitor! Do you think this is some kind of game? That's exactly what it is, furball.
Disturbed at that thought, we pay Al a quick visit, upgrade our bodyguards, and once again step into the battle dome in the hopes of conquering the Tower of Power. These tournaments are essentially the only taste of platforming you're ever going to get in these games, as it's well and truly focused on the fighting. Ironically enough though, the platforming offers some of the greatest challenges, as it requires not only pattern recognition, but timing as well. Reaching the top of this tower has us surviving another gauntlet, this time with a large selection of tougher enemies. By this stage, I'd already locked in and had started abusing the fuck out of the Holo Shield launcher. With this, we'd gotten out of ELO hell, but we weren't done just yet. See, each of these tournaments also comes with its own set of Dread challenges, and one of these in particular really felt like a slap in the face. Just for some context, a few minutes beforehand, I'd said this.
Wrench upgrade? Why would I ever need a wrench upgrade?
So you can imagine my reaction when the next Dread challenge required us to complete it using only the wrench.
Wait, where's my... Oh shit.
What followed was a painstakingly slow kiting fest where I'd swing at an enemy once every 38 seconds or so. It was truly painful, but I did manage to complete it without dying. Now, despite wanting to end it all, there was one positive outcome from completing this challenge. I had absolute confidence in my abilities heading into the Temple of Shah. This confidence was almost immediately shattered though, as I failed one of the easiest Dread challenges. Twice. The goal here is simple. Destroy a bunch of these floating balls to reach a specific score. What I hadn't realized during these initial attempts though was the fact that this bot moved on its own. So there I was, trying desperately to turn around and go back for some of the first targets, not knowing I was fighting a losing battle. Outside of this one challenge though, the rest of the missions weren't too hard to complete, which was honestly surprising as they definitely featured a tougher selection of enemies. These feelings carried on over to Orxon, which did prove to be more challenging than Shah. Most of this difficulty came in relation to the sheer number of enemies we were faced with. Unfortunately for them though, I'd just gotten my hands on one of the best weapons to ever exist.
Wait, did I just one-hit that executioner?
Once again, the only time I'd ever feel threatened was when I was in the Landstalker. I'm not even sure why. I think its slowish movements make it hard to avoid a lot of the damage coming at us. Either way, we did manage to complete every Dread challenge, earning us a place in the Crusader tournament. It's here where we get to face off against Reactor. Yeah, this guy was one of the easiest bosses yet. Having obliterated Reactor, we'd gotten this false sense of superiority, and the next two planets being just as easy definitely didn't help. The Valix Belt in particular is almost too easy, mainly due to the fact that half of its missions involve flying around in a spaceship. For once, we got to be the cancerous aerial unit that's impossible to hit, as we blasted every enemy from the next galaxy over. Torval, on the other hand, did offer a few challenging moments, as by this point, the game knew it had to throw giant-ass floating scorpion things at us if it wanted us dead. Even these flying freaks of nature couldn't stand up to us, however, and before long, we'd garnered a spot in the prestigious Vindicator tournament. It should be fairly obvious by this point just how different this game is. But if there's one thing that remains consistent, it's that Clank will always pull the 10 out of 10 baddies.
My core CPU.
Ooh, that is a lot of throughput.
Jealous beyond belief, it was up to us to prove to everyone during this tournament that we were indeed him. And to do this, we'd have to fight our way through increasingly difficult waves, with each wave requiring us to use a different weapon. It's a good thing we've been cycling between our weapons and leveling them all equally. Otherwise, this challenge may have proved, well, challenging. The brilliant spectacle that was our godly performance ultimately led to us having to face off against Scyther if he ever got a Mega Evolution. Unfortunately for him though, we've got every possible typing required to inflict super effective damage on him, and while he had a few tricks of his own, we were able to clap his cheeks personally with the Scorpion Flower. The consequence of this choice meant we were left covered in the entrails of this bug, although it wouldn't take long for us to complete a magical girl transformation into a new armor set. Now, despite having fought our way to the Vindicator tier, we weren't the only ones making big progress, as Al had somehow figured out how to unlock the BDSM chokers holding us hostage. Being the kink master that he is though, Ace Hardon couldn't accept this, as he not only shot Al right up the ass, but he couldn't help engaging in some light shock play with us as well. Having spent weeks in the submissive role, it was about time we showed these posers who the real Dom was.
They made a mistake bringing us here, Clank. Now they're gonna pay for it.
Before we could do that though, there were still a few planets we had to fight through. The first of which being Stygia. Stygia is honestly just a clusterfuck. Most of the time I had no idea what was going on, as enemies just spawned on top of my face half the time. It also didn't help that a lot of the enemies at this stage were just the overpowered ones, like the Executioners and Laserbacks. That said, this was also one of the easiest planets to complete, mainly due to half the challenges taking place in a vehicle. Alongside this, there were also no Dread challenges, which honestly felt a bit strange. I guess Ace Hardon was starting to shit himself at the prospect of us rising up the ranks to face him, so we had no choice but to obliterate their Dread challenges on this planet. That's not official law or anything, that's just something I can imagine him doing. While I was imagining these scenarios in my pea-brain, I hadn't realized that our bodyguards had been captured, and despite our constant bickering, I'd grown somewhat close to them. Definitely not close enough to risk my life for them, that's for sure, but it's not up to me unfortunately. It's up to the plot, which saw us traveling to Meraxis to free them. The difficulty definitely steps up here, and it's mainly due to the influx of enemies during each challenge. It honestly feels like you're facing off against an entire army at certain points, which makes it extremely hard to avoid chip damage along the way. That said, there are certain strategies that work extremely well. For example, there's the I'm a certified bitch strategy that sees us camping behind holo shields the entire time. Or what about the I'm dog shit, so let's hide behind this shield strategy. There's also the I'm just leveling my holo shield launcher, I swear strategy, where, well, you get the point.
No shit.
Safe to say, I abused the absolute shit out of this weapon, and it carried me all the way to the Liberator tournament. Before extinguishing Ace's hard-on for good though, I first looked to collect every skill point we'd missed. Now, due to the sheer number of skill points present, we'd already obtained a fair few just from playing through the game. For the most part, they're extremely straightforward, with most of them falling into a specific category. There's weapon and mod-based skill points, environmental skill points, bodyguard focus skill points, and difficulty skill points. Outside of the few difficulty-based skill points that require us to complete certain missions on exterminated difficulty, the rest can be completed during this playthrough, and as I said before, most of them were extremely simple to complete. In fact, the only one I struggled with was Invulnerable, which required us to complete any challenge in the Valix Belt without taking any damage. There aren't any easy missions we can abuse to grab this one, meaning I had to play like a colossal pussy. But then again, what's new? The only other annoyances were specific weapon challenges, in this case the wrench challenges. These weren't aids because of the difficulty though. See, the ones making me want to somersault into a nuclear missile were my very own bodyguards who'd straight up just steal my bloody kills. It got to the point where I considered offing them myself, only to not revive them just so I'd be able to complete these skill points in peace. Alas, after multiple cock-block attempts by my own robotic companions, we'd collected all but a handful of skill points. All that was left was the final showdown against the erected superhero, Ace Hardon. Following suit, I immediately erected a hollow shield in front of us, almost as if I'd been primed into spamming them. Which, okay, even I admit this is getting a bit ridiculous now. Even so, this fight was interesting, as it felt new yet strangely familiar. That's when it hit me. This scumbag had somehow got a hold of Dr. Nefarious's moveset and just paraphrased it a little bit. From his bombs that send shockwaves across the arena to his shadow clone jutsu who are immediately decimated by our Arbiter. Most of his moves follow a similar pattern to those of the big-headed goofball. The only real difference is that this guy runs away a lot more before whipping out his own shield. Like imagine that, hiding behind a shield. God, that's truly pathetic. What? Alas, after getting shafted ourselves, we put Ace Hardon out of his misery. Or so I thought. Who knew his eyebrows could be the last thing to pass on? Either way, with Ace's flaccid body laid to rest, it was our time to shine in the spotlight, as we're offered all the fame we could ever hope for. There was just one catch. We'd have to be Vox's personal toothbrusher, and after getting one whiff of that stench, we knew this relationship would never work out. In defiance, Vox sends us off to the Ghost Station, which features all new enemy types. Well, they're the same enemies, but they're transparent now. Okay, yeah fine, they're the same, but they might be stronger. Honestly, I have no idea. For a dread zone that was said to be unbeatable, it was very much beatable. Not only does this dread zone have no dread challenges, its skill points were also extremely rudimentary, and after a few runs through each challenge, we'd fully exorcised the Ghost Station. Having beaten him at his own game, Vox had no choice but to play his ultimate trump card, obliterate the entire station that he'd worked his whole life to build. Wait, what kind of shitty plan is that? Either way, with all our biggest haters turning into fans, it was only right we'd put on a show as we pulverized our way through multiple waves of colossal enemies, destroying each power plant as we passed. With the containment fields deactivated and the explosives a non-issue, we're confronted by Vox one last time. And while I expected the cute little slugger to morph into the final boss, instead we're set to face off against Vox himself. Now all things considered, this guy's a complete joke. Not only does he spawn in a bunch of enemies whose sole purpose is to refill the magazine on our guns, but his attacks aren't anything to worry ourselves over either. The only thing he's really got going for him is his tankiness, as even with fully upgraded guns, it was taking a good while to get him down. Now despite getting slapped up by a Lombox who spent the last 3 games getting absolutely humbled, Vox still won't shut up about his goddamn ratings. Having heard enough, we promptly exit this scene, stealing Slugger while we're at it. As we fly off into space, the Dread Station detonates behind us, allowing the whole galaxy, kids included, to witness the humiliating end of Gleeman Vox. Similar to its predecessors, we're immediately slapped in the face by this game's challenge mode, which for all intents and purposes was the hardest experience I'd encountered during this entire playthrough. If you remember from the start, to 100% this game, we'd have to complete the entire thing on exterminated difficulty, which is unlocked during challenge mode. Safe to say, it didn't take long for me to understand just how rough this playthrough was going to be.
Wait, what is that damage? This is like the first enemy of the game.
To say the enemies did astronomically enormous damage now would be an understatement.
This is fucking bullshit.
Certain missions almost seemed impossible due to how weak my weapons felt, while others required absolute perfection, as getting hit at all would mean being sent back to the start of the stage. Safe to say, my arsehole had never been so sore, as I limped my way through the first half of the game. To no one's surprise, I'm sure, things only got worse later on though, as I would quite literally run out of ammo before being able to kill a single enemy.
I can't believe it. I can't even kill a single enemy with a whole clip.
Dread challenges had started to live up to their name, as I was pounded again and again.
What? He predicted my surge.
The one saving grace was that the enemies that we defeated didn't respawn, so while my death count was getting fucked, I was able to slowly power my way through it. By the time we'd reached the Crusader tournament for the second time, we'd collected 2 exterminator cards, but that was about to change, as I discovered one of the most broken leveling strategies in the entire game. See, one of the dread challenges in this very tournament has us obliterating a seemingly endless number of enemies as they rush towards a barrier behind us. Just the sheer number of enemies alone makes for an astronomical amount of weapon XP as well as bolts, and having witnessed just how fast that bar fills up, I just knew I'd be camping here for a good while. Thus begun the cheesiest and cheapiest camp fest to ever grace the gaming world, as I sat on my ass and held down the fire button for every single weapon. To speed things up even more, I had bought out and equipped multiple weapon XP mods to each gun, making their level up speed absolutely ridiculous.
Bro, this is fucking disgusting. What is this?
Within the hour, I had completely maxed out most of my weapons to version 99 and had amassed a staggering amount of bolts. We'd also blown past the 100 nanotech required for the Eviscerator Exterminator card, as well as purchased every mega variant to get the Reactor Exterminator card. As you can imagine, with our supercharged weapons, the rest of the game was relatively easy, although we still had to be somewhat careful as our enemies still did a hefty amount of damage. That said, we were able to take down Ace hard-on for a second time without taking any damage, and ironically enough, this was the final skill point that we needed, so not only did this earn us 3 PlayStation trophies, it also earned us the Vox Exterminator card. All that remained now was to complete the Ghost Station once again. This started off relatively well. The enemies couldn't deal with our tremendous damage, and our holo shields lasted for a few millennia before vanishing. This chill energy lasted until the very last stage, where I got absolutely plastered while trying to destroy the power generators. Honestly, I'm not even sure what I died to. There's just so much shit going on at once, and the damage is so immense that you really can't afford to get hit at all. Other times I just completely brain farted, as I forgot to deploy my shield before walking headfirst into Landwalker fire.
What the fuck am I doing?
What can I say? It wouldn't be a Legend of Kai video if I didn't play like absolute arse during the final mission. Thankfully, our second fight with Vox went as planned, and following the second running of the credits, we were rewarded with our final Exterminator card. Our reward, just like in Up Your Arsenal, is the Ninja outfit, thus bringing our 100% adventures, at least within the PS2 saga, to an enjoyable end. All that remains is ranking each of these games from easiest to hardest. Now, despite Deadlock featuring the toughest challenge mode out of the bunch, it still turned out to be the easiest to 100% at 22 deaths. Sure, you could chalk this up to the initial playthrough's difficulty choice, but if I didn't choose the standard difficulty, it wouldn't have been fair to the other games which had no difficulty option to begin with. Speaking of which, the original Ratchet Clank comes in at 3rd place. It might have the weakest set of weapons in terms of their firepower, but to counteract this, the enemies in comparison are also the weakest of the entire saga. It had a few tough skill points, but apart from that, the game had a pretty solid difficulty progression curve. Up Your Arsenal shoots its way into 2nd place, as it featured a ton of extra content. Not only did we have to level multiple weapons to Omega tier, but it also had tough skill points and dozens of extra challenges to complete. Even so, it couldn't outshine its predecessor, with Going Commando taking the spot as the hardest mainline Ratchet Clank game in the PS2 saga to 100%. A lot of this can be chalked up to Grelbin and those fucking Yetis, but even outside of that, the game had a good few difficulty spikes, ultimately earning its spot at the top of this list. With all that said though, these rankings mean fuck all in the grand scheme of things. Let's be honest, I just try and put an interesting spin on these franchises because it then gives me an excuse to play through them. That said, I wouldn't have it any other way, as this was a marvelous experience from start to finish. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well, and if you did, don't be shy, hit that like button. I'd advise against subscribing though, only the mentally insane go that far. Jokes aside, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day, and I'll see you all in the next video. Hopefully.